First, they came for our manuals. Now, they have come for our discs. This is really quite depressing. We've all heard about this future coming where you will own nothing and you'll be happy, but we were always kind of hoping that it would take a long time. But Sony have basically drawn first blood with what they've done here. They are the first big players to come out and just straight up say, we are going to be ceasing production of all physical media. Now, this is a big problem because it means that we only have one course of action to buy our games on PlayStation, and that is digitally through the PlayStation Store. Now, what this basically does is that it takes away our ownership of games. When we have games physically, we own that game. We can pop it into our PlayStation now, we can pop it into our PlayStation 10 years from now, 20 years from now, however long we want to, we can use and play that game whenever we want. However, when you have digital games, we lose all of that control, and the person that now decides that is Sony, the corporation. And that is a big problem because, as we have also seen alongside this announcement, Sony have delisted over 550 movies from their PlayStation Store. These are digital movies, just like how you buy digital games from their PlayStation Store, and they've just gotten rid of them. Now, that means that customers can no longer buy them, and the customers who already bought them and paid their hard-earned money for it, they have woken up, signed into their PlayStation library, and found that those movies have been completely wiped. And Sony have not given them any kind of reimbursement. Now, that should not be legal. I'm surprised they're even able to get away with that. I'm surprised they haven't got a class action lawsuit up their asses for this. This just goes to show how dirty the corporation is, because Sony most likely have put in their terms and conditions that they can do this. They can erase your digital library, and you have no say over it, and you cannot complain about it. Again, this is an example of customers no longer having control over their purchases, because if the customer bought these movies on DVD or Blu-ray or 4K, then Sony would not be able to do this. But because you bought it from their PlayStation Store, they can remove it. And that is the big question, is that if this is what they're going to do with your movies on the PlayStation Store, that means that they can do the same with your games on the PlayStation Store. And the question is not if they'll do it, the question is when will they do it? When will the games that you bought, when will their number be up? And when will they take those away from the store and deprive you of those games and give you no refund or reimbursement? Now, this is where the big backlash is coming from, is the fact that corporations, they want to deprive you of all of your movies and games because we all know what they want to do. They want to charge you again. You know, they make remasters of games, and then they make remasters of remasters, like if you saw the PS5 version of The Last of Us Part 1. They already remastered that game for the PlayStation 4. The PlayStation 5 is backwards compatible with the PS4, so why would anyone want to buy the more expensive PS5 remaster when they can just go to the perfectly great PS4 remaster, which, in my opinion, looks a lot better? And as a result, the PS5 remake of The Last of Us sold very poorly, because most people were like, yeah, we don't need to get this, we've already got The Last of Us, and we can play the remaster that's available. However, that's what happens when you have physical media. But imagine if Sony, just like what they did with the movies that they delisted, imagine if they released The Last of Us Part 1 remaster for the PS5, and they're like, we don't want people going for the PS4 version, we want people to buy this version. Then they can easily just delist The Last of Us remaster for the PS4, and that means removing the game from the store so no one can buy it. It also means removing it from people who did buy it, removing it from their library, and telling them, well, now the only way you can play The Last of Us Remastered is if you get the PS5 version. Now imagine 5 years from now, or maybe even less, if they say, with the PS6, we're going to remaster the remaster of the remaster for The Last of Us Part 1. And then they'll play the exact same game again, and they will delist the PS5 version of the remaster to sell you the PS6 version. Now, this is just one example. Whether they do it or not, I don't know, but I'm saying they could. And this is ultimately what the corporation wants to do, is they want to have like this endless well of charging you for the same product if they can. Now, that's just one of the possibilities and the dangers of what can happen if you only have Sony to buy your PlayStation games from and not physical media. But another fear is, when will they delist your PlayStation 4 or PlayStation 5 games? Because if you have bought a bunch of digital games on your PS4, they can prevent you from downloading them onto your system. Because that is another bit of news that Sony dropped alongside delisting all these movies. Sony have actually made an announcement alongside all of these other crappy announcements that the PlayStation Store will be unavailable on PS3 and PS Vita, which means you can't install games that you purchased for those consoles and play them on those devices anymore. Now, you can talk semantics and how many people are really playing on the PlayStation 3 and the PS Vita anymore, but that's not the point. The point is that there are people that still do. And for those people, their purchases now, they no longer have control over it. Sony does, and they're saying, get stuffed. Now, this is where you should be thinking long term, because if this is what they're doing to the PlayStation 3 and the PS Vita right now, when are they going to do this to the PS4, or the PS5, or even the PS6? I know the PS6 is going to be right around the corner and it'll be all brand spanking new, but there is even going to be a time limit on the PS6 for when Sony eventually start delisting that, or they start preventing you from installing games that you purchased for it. This is basically like an endless well of like dangerous possibilities of what Sony can do with all of these anti-consumer practices, because sacrificing physical media means sacrificing your control of the games and movies that you purchase. So that's why losing physical media for your video games is a big deal. The studio can take it away from you, and you no longer will have the peace of mind that you will own this forever. And if Sony decide, they've given a long time before deciding to shut down the PlayStation Store on the PS3 and the PS Vita, but if it was up to them, they can shorten and tighten that window. And if they want, they can say, well, when we release our PS7, we want to discontinue the PS6. If they wanted to, they could. As Captain America himself said in one of the better lines in the overall MCU,
it's run by people with agendas, and agendas change.
That's exactly it. These are people with agendas, and Sony might have an agenda right now to get rid of physical media, but once they've done that and they move on to the next phase of their plans, now that they've actually got you stuck on digital media, they can then move on to their next phase of the plan, which I wouldn't be surprised if Sony have already got it planned, but for us, it's just, we're looking at the danger now that we're not looking at what that future perceived plan could be. But none of it is good, and it all starts here by moving you over fully onto digital. Now, I've told you why the physical games matter, but that's not where the only problem is. The other problem with this switch over to just pure digital is the price. You see, Sony do not control the price of the games that you buy on physical, and to an extent, they don't really control the price of the games on their PlayStation Store. Because on physical games, the prices of those eventually go down. Not only do they go down from retailers, like if you go to Amazon, they go down, but they'll also go down in the sense that people buy games secondhand, they trade them with friends. You have all these different options. So if you can't afford or just don't think that there's enough value for you to pay full price for a game, then like many people, you just wait for the price to go down. Again, that's another option. That's another way you can play these games that otherwise you wouldn't be able to. So right now, as it is, Sony do not control the price of their games. But if they go full on digital, they will control the price, because they will not feel the need to be competitive with retailers or with secondhand stores, because they are the only place you will be able to buy the game from. That means Sony has full control over the pricing structure of their games. So that means that if it's up to Sony, if they don't want to, they will never drop the price of their games. They will always keep it at full price and force you to be like, well, if you want to buy a PlayStation game or these exclusives, you have no choice but to pay full price for them. And that is just gross. It's a level of control that we don't want the corporations to have, because when they have that kind of power, they will abuse it. Not to mention that you might think that the worst price they can charge you right now is $70, which is what the retail price for games are right now. But don't forget, with the Insomniac leak that happened, we found out that Sony, their long-term plan was to make games go up from $60 at the time to $100. And you would be crazy to think that they were just gonna stop at $100. This is what I mean. Once you give control to Sony with these PlayStation prices, they can charge you whatever they want and you have no control over it. That turns this hobby, which is already pricing people out with the RAM crisis, and it will make it even more niche, and it will price people out of just video game prices in general. So that's another problem. You don't want Sony controlling pricing. And here's another example of how Sony are already showing how they're going to abuse this power, because there is something that Sony have been experimenting with called dynamic pricing. What dynamic pricing means is that Sony, using a bunch of algorithms and data from your purchasing habits on their PlayStation Store, they will look at your purchase history and think, okay, does this gamer buy a lot of games from our store? Because if he does, we don't need to give him any sales, because he's going to buy a lot of games from our store anyway, so we don't need to give him any sales. But the people on our store that do not buy our games very often, how can we get them to buy our games more? I know, let's give them a discount. Let's give them a sale on these games, and maybe they will buy it. And then that's how we can get these customers to buy games from us more. So basically, if you're a loyal customer, you get no sales. If you're someone that barely buys any games from PlayStation, you get all the sales. That's what dynamic pricing is, and it just goes to show how devious Sony are when it comes to pricing. And this is right now when we still have physical media available. If this is how bad they are already right now when there are options, imagine how bad they will get when there are no options, but to buy the games only on the PlayStation Store. This really is a huge problem, and that's why there is such a huge backlash going on, and Sony are really going through the ringer with a backlash here. In fact, it's said that they are going radio silent and taking a break from social media for the next few days, because they know there's going to be a backlash, and they're hoping that the backlash will die down by the time they get back online. But my advice to you guys is to make sure that that backlash doesn't die down. Keep it going, and make sure that you constantly mock Sony for doing this. Because like I told you with that dynamic pricing, which is basically price discrimination, corporations do not care about you. If you think that you've bought all these PlayStation games, that means they care. They don't. They think, great, this person will buy more of our games, but how can we get the person over there who's not buying our games to buy more of our games? They don't care about any of you, and this move shows that. Not just this move of shutting down production on physical games, but also all of these tactics, these underhanded tactics that they're doing when it comes to digital games and digital movies, as I have explained. And there are people out there who all they do is buy digital games, and for them, they don't care about this. In fact, they actually can get quite aggressive and say, why do you even care about physical media? But here's the thing. Physical media creates competition in the marketplace, like I said, which is what motivates Sony to try to bring more sales to the PlayStation Store, because they want you to buy the games from the PlayStation Store rather than through physical games through retailers and secondhand shops like GameStop or CEX if you're in the UK. So that's why Sony put more discounts on their PlayStation Store. That means that those of you that buy games only through PlayStation's digital storefront, you have been benefiting from physical games even if you've never bought a single physical game. So physical games, if you don't want to buy them, don't buy them. Great for you. But the thing is, don't act like you've not been benefiting from them, because you have. And Sony, as well as all those problems I mentioned that they have and how we cannot trust them, we also can't trust their security, because I don't think I have ever seen a digital storefront or service that has been hacked as much times as Sony has. And not only does it get hacked and people's personal data get stolen, but people's PlayStation accounts have also been hacked. And if it wasn't for certain people having such big followers on social media, there is a big chance that Sony would not have reinstated their accounts and reclaimed it from the hackers. So even if Sony was well behaved on the PlayStation Store, which they are not, the PlayStation Store is not ready for a full digital push for everyone to go over from physical to digital. So all of this is just a complete shit show. There is no upside to this. Now, for me personally, I loved the PS4. That was my first home console. Prior to that, the only way I could play games was through portable devices like the Nintendo DS and the PSP. And I have collections of those too to this day, which I can still play because it's physical. And I can still play these games 10, 20, 30 years from now. That's the brilliance of physical media. But when I got the PS4, it was a great generation, and I was looking so forward to the PS5. But the PS5, sadly, due to Sony trying to prioritize a lot of live service slop, essentially, they have really been lacking with the single-player games this generation, and we are only starting to get them now towards the end of the generation. So for me, I didn't get the PlayStation 5 like I thought I would, and instead I got a Steam Deck, which you can also see right behind me over there. And the Steam Deck for me has been great. It's essentially the game console I've been using after the PS4. Not only can it play games on the PS4, games that I have not played yet, but it can also play games from the previous generations, and a lot of those games are still on Steam. So I played games like BioShock, I finally got around to playing Tomb Raider 2013 recently, and I'm going to play Rise of the Tomb Raider soon, which I'm really looking forward to. But basically, I really got into PC gaming while Sony was slacking off with the PS5. And I'm okay with buying games on Steam because unlike Sony, if the games are delisted for licensing agreements and things, you still own that game. They don't take it away from your library like what Sony did. So that is something which gives me reassurance. The other thing that gives me reassurance is that games on Steam, they go on like crazy prices on sale. So even though I don't like buying digital licenses with my digital games where you're essentially just renting them rather than owning them, I am okay with paying for a digital game and just a digital license if the price is low enough. So I know at the back of my mind, if the game gets taken from me, I won't like it, but it won't hurt as if I were paying full price for each of those games. With Sony, however, we're not going to be having that kind of future. They are going to try to charge you as much as they can, and they'll even try to upgrade the price of the games too. So I'm not confident in Sony's ability to maintain a healthy digital storefront like what Steam has done. However, in the back of my mind, I was always thinking, you know what? Even though I've got the Steam Deck, which works very well, if ever I want to play the latest and greatest games, I always felt like PlayStation was there. And the reason I felt PlayStation was there is because just like my PlayStation 4 games that you can see right behind me, I was thinking, you know what? I would really love to have a bunch of PS6 games lined up as a collection. So I have physical media, I'll have the games for as long as I want, my purchase is preserved. But if the PS6 is going to move to an all-digital future where your purchase is not going to be preserved, and you have to deal with Sony and their shady business tactics, then quite frankly, to me, the PlayStation is dead. I don't want a PlayStation 6. I don't care if that Wolverine game is coming. I don't care if the Wolverine game gets a sequel. I don't care if Spider-Man 3 comes out on the PS6. I don't care if it's the best game in the world. I don't care if it's even a Batman game, which is the whole reason I bought my PS4 was so I could play Batman Arkham Knight, and I unboxed that console on my channel all those years ago. I don't care. I am not going to pay money for a console that is all digital and is connected to Sony and their shady tactics. I would rather just not play the PlayStation altogether. So if Sony does go through with this and they cease production of physical media for the PlayStation 6, then I will from now on give up on PlayStation. I will not buy any of their future consoles, I will not buy any of their future games, I'll be done. I just don't trust Sony. The only way I was willing to continue with the PlayStation for future generations is if they kept physical media. But by doing this, they have basically just lost a customer forever. So, what do you guys think of all of this? I have given a lot of my reasons, and honestly, I could go into a lot more reasons in a lot more detail. But this is a really dangerous business practice, and it just goes to show the depressing future that we're going into, which is all digital. Now, there is one way that I would be happy with an all-digital future, but that'll be for another video. So if you want to know how I would be okay with an all-digital future, stay tuned for that and I will explain my reasonings. And it would be something which not just I would be okay with, but I think a lot of people would be okay with. So guys, thank you very much for watching. Sound off below with this sad and depressing news. It really is not looking good, but if we keep applying pressure on Sony, like people have done with other companies like AMD recently with FSR4, chances are we can push Sony into keeping physical media, or at least preserving enough physical media to where those of us that want to get physical media can still go out there and do it. Another thing I would recommend is if you've done any pre-orders on Sony's store, cancel it and get the physical version of the game, like with the new Wolverine game coming up. GTA 6 is a different scenario. The fact that you don't even get the disc in that, but just a code. Rockstar are the ones that really did push this, because the pre-orders for that game have reached $1 billion just with pre-orders. And I think that was enough for Sony to look at and say, you know what, we're going to go with this all-digital future. Even though everyone knows GTA is just an odd, isolated incident. People are willing to do that with GTA, but they're not willing to do it with every other game. But Sony for some reason thought they would be, but let's show them that we're not. So yeah, thanks for watching guys. Be sure to let me know what you think of this whole situation. It really is a sad situation, but only time will tell as to how it will go. So Until then, guys, be sure to give this video a thumbs up, hit that hype button, be sure to subscribe as well so you can stay up to date with all my future videos, and I'll catch all of you very soon. Take care.